This is Histories and Mysteries. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Jessica. And on this week's episode, Ashley is going to finish off her Murdaugh story. And I am going to be talking about a mishmash of things, but it basically has to do with the oppression of women. And it's going to tie into my story next week. So stay tuned.
About the oppression of women.
Yeah. But it's really horrible because it just talks about different medieval torture methods, which were more or less specifically targeted to women. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's quite awful.
Yeah, it's not great. The rest of my story is not great either.
Super.
Yeah. So this is part two. I got my resources from that the Netflix documentary, as well as news station, like news reporting from WJCL, the Post and Courier, CNN, and a People magazine article.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So
Well,
just
dive
to
on in.
thanks, I will. Just to recap from last week, if you haven't listened to it yet, go ahead and listen to it. But if you have and you forgot, this is kind of a little recap. So Paul and Maggie, who are Alec Murdaugh's wife and son, were both found with gunshot wounds, dead on the Murdaugh hunting ranch. Alec found him after he had come home from checking on his parents. And this is the timeline that he said that he woke up from his nap around 7:31 p.m. He didn't see Maggie or Paul. So he texted them around 8:05 saying he was going to check on his mom and dad, who both were in poor health. And he got back around 10:20 p.m., which is when he discovered his wife and son had been shot.
What a liar.
And one of the things they thought was that perhaps someone killed them who had been giving them death threats, and Paul was getting death threats because of a boating accident that happened a few years earlier, where Mallory Beach was killed. So that's what we talked about last week. So now that we're kind of back on track of the night that they were murdered, eventually Alec and Buster. So Buster was Paul's older brother, Alec's other son, put up a $100,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of the murderers. The media obviously went wild over this case, because it had to do with the Murdaughs, and they were a very rich, very well-to-do family in the area. And they speculated that it perhaps did have something to do with Mallory's death, the girl we spoke about last week who got in that boating accident and died. And shortly after the media started kind of running with the story, the police picked up on this too and started questioning those who were on the boat. And their main suspect at first was Mallory's boyfriend, Anthony. And they interviewed Anthony in this documentary, and he said that they went to his house and they went to his work to question him. And he said he was pissed off because Paul was one of his good friends, and he couldn't believe that they would accuse him of his murder. But I don't know, man, if my friend had behaved like Paul did and one of my loved ones died because of it, I don't know that I would consider them a friend still.
No, like that. No, because he basically just made everybody party with him and wouldn't take any of them home, right?
Right.
Like that doesn't seem like a very good friend.
Right.
And
But
then they blamed it on Anthony, right?
they blamed it on Connor.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. There's too many people.
There's a lot of people. Well, and that was the other suspect that they had was Connor, because they thought, well, maybe Connor and like his family or something was mad that the Murdaughs tried to put the blame, tried to pin the driving of the boat on Connor instead of Paul, who was actually the one driving. So they also went to Morgan's place of work, and Morgan was Paul's former girlfriend, and asked her for a bunch of DNA samples. So they were just trying to rule everybody out. And she said, you know what? Sure, but do not overlook Alec Murdaugh. So she was right there kind of saying, like, don't overlook him, pay attention to him. And media said that this was kind of a weird case from the beginning because the police came out and said that there was no danger to the public, even though there was a murder on the loose. So why would they say there was no danger to the public, if they didn't know who it was yet? And after that, the case just went silent. There was very little information coming out. And Alec's lawyers did come out and say that he had an airtight alibi, which was visiting his parents. But kind of just went nowhere.
But was he visiting his parents?
No.
All right.
Well,
We all
maybe he
know
did
he
at one
did
point,
it.
but yeah. So media did eventually learn more about the guns that were used as well. Paul was apparently shot by a shotgun. And shotguns apparently, which I don't know anything about guns as we've talked about on here, but apparently they don't leave a ballistics trail. Because they don't have like shell casings or whatever.
Yeah.
But there are multiple shotguns on the Murdaugh property because they're at a hunting lodge. Now Maggie was shot with a different gun. She was shot with an AR-15 with a blackout 300 bullet, which is apparently like a very specific type of bullet.
Oh.
I don't know anything more than that.
Other than the
And
fact that he is a friggin' moron, why would you choose a gun that is so easily traceable?
yeah, because the Murdaughs owned this gun that took
Yeah.
this. Yeah. But oddly, none of them had been turned over to the police. Even to like rule out that it wasn't these guns, and the police didn't like come get them or anything.
That's suspicious.
Yes. And as we talked about last week, this wouldn't be the first or second or third time that the Murdaughs may have covered up a murder.
Nope.
So at this point, Alec is probably thinking it's pretty easy to get away with murder because not only did Mallory die, which that wasn't murder, it was an accidental death, but they did try and pin it on Connor, and kind of who knows what would have happened because Paul never got his day in court, but they tried to cover up that murder. And in 2018, Maggie called 911 saying that their housekeeper, Gloria Ann Statterfield, had fallen from their stairs and was bleeding from her head. So there was a 911 call you can listen to, and I listened to it and I didn't get much from it. I think Maggie does sound very worried. But she does kind of get exasperated at all the questions the 911 operator is asking her. And the 911 operator is like, hey, they're on their way to you. Me asking you these questions doesn't slow them down at all. And at one point, Maggie hands the phone over to a male voice. It kind of sounded younger. I'm thinking maybe one of her sons. And he got mad that she was asking so many questions too.
It's their
But
job.
yeah, they were just like getting annoyed. And it was said that she had tripped over the family dogs, and that's what caused her to fall down these stairs. And these were outdoor stairs, so they were the stairs like leading up to their house, and they were brick.
Ow.
So oddly enough, and I talk about this a bit later, but I think I'm going to bring it up now. So if she was going up the stairs, right?
I thought she was going down the stairs.
No, she was going up the stairs.
Oh.
And
How do you? I mean, I trip going upstairs.
right. And so she tripped over the dogs and she landed. So the way she landed, she would have had to have fallen like backwards instead of forward. Which,
Yeah, that's weird.
yeah, because her feet were on a higher stair than her head. Yeah. So, and she did go to the hospital, and unfortunately she did die a few days later in the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she had broken ribs and a severe head injury, which
What?
it they were brick stairs. So if you were to fall backwards like that, I could see where that would cause a severe head injury. But there was just some questionable things around this. So one of the things was that a few months before this event took place, Gloria was cleaning around the house and she found little baggies of drugs under Alec's bed. At the time, Alec was known to have not known, but like a few people here and there knew he had a pretty severe addiction to painkillers. And um, he would like go back to his house to detox on the weekend, and Paul would stay with him to make sure like he was okay. And Gloria knew this, and the rumor was that Gloria was afraid to go to Maggie to tell her that she found these little baggies of drugs because she was afraid that either she would lose her job or Maggie would get mad and say she was snooping. So Gloria did end up going to Paul to tell him that she had found these drugs. And
Oh,
this happened shortly before she passed.
oh,
No,
that's not suspicious at all.
yeah. Um, so the rumor was that either Maggie or Paul had pushed her down the stairs because she knew too much. Um, but Morgan, Paul's ex-girlfriend, said that Paul was really, really distraught by her death. I mean, so either he's a really good actor or, maybe it could still be Maggie. And another weird thing about it was that Alec said that he was there and she had told him that she had tripped over the dogs. Oddly, the 911 operator, when she was on the phone with them, they said that she couldn't talk, she could only mumble. And there's a groundskeeper that was there, and he said that Alec wasn't even there when this happened.
Oh,
So some lies about this. So sadly enough, they have her funeral and stuff like that. And apparently at the funeral, Alex said that he was going, and this doesn't make sense to me. I don't really get insurance, so I guess it's a thing. But he said that he was going to file a wrongful death claim against the insurance that he has on his property. So basically, like, sue himself so that the insurance company covers it, and then he would give that money to Gloria's kids.
what?
I don't know how it works, but basically, he would file some kind of lawsuit. The insurance would give him money, and he would then give that to Gloria's kids.
Why not just give Gloria's kids the money?
Well, because this way the insurance would pay for it.
Oh my God.
So,
Okay. So you're not actually doing a good thing.
well, I think you're kind of like I think it would be like if anybody else sued you for hurting themselves on your property, like your insurance premiums might go up. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
get insurance, but anyway, that was the deal. Um, so do you remember last week when we oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Take that back. I moved some stuff around in this story, and this next sentence deals with something that I moved to after this, so it doesn't make sense. So
Okay.
but yeah, so he did file this claim, and he ended up getting $4.8 million that he was going to give to Gloria's kids. People think that that might be another reason why people may have wanted to get revenge, because they felt that Gloria's death was kind of fishy. So
No
like,
shit.
yeah, so like that could be maybe another reason that might play into this. But don't you worry, Jessica, there's more. That's
I
not
wasn't
all.
I wasn't worried. I promise you.
So during the course of this investigation into Maggie and Paul's murder, One news outlet learned of a traffic report for the death of a kid being teenager, named Stephen Smith in 2015. So apparently, July 8th of 2015, a man was driving down a rural highway in Hampton County when he saw a body in the middle of the road. He called the police, worried like, "Hey, there's someone laying in the middle of the road. I don't know what's going on with them. I'm afraid they might be, they'll get hurt, they'll get hit by a car or whatever." And so police showed up. They found that the man was indeed dead in the middle. And I say man, again, he was a teenager. And right around the corner was his car.
Do you, I don't know about, it's gonna sound really bad, but like I I work the afternoon shift on Tuesdays usually. So when I'm getting home, it's dark out. I live in the country, so I have like the dirt, like not the dirt roads, but like
Pretty
just the back
close.
roads.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anytime I see like anything out of the corner of my eye, I think it's gonna be like a dead body in a bag. Like and then I don't know why I always expect I'm always like searching for cats to take home, like stray cats. And then I'll see like a bag or like a suitcase or like a shoe on the side of the road. And I'm like, oh, should I stop? Maybe there's a
Is there
dead
a
body,
cat in
but
there?
like,
Oh, I was thinking cat.
no, like maybe there's a dead body, but like, I live in Canada and I know that like murder does happen, but it's definitely not as prominent, I don't think, as in the States. And I don't think I'm like ever gonna find a dead body on the side of the road, but I don't know. It's just that just made me think, like, because he's just like driving and he found a dead body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how wild
Yeah.
to think
Right.
that that happens.
So you never know, Jessica. You might find a dead body on your way home from work. Just don't look.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't actively look for dead bodies, but as soon as I see something out of the ordinary, I'm like, oh my
Oh,
God.
dead body.
Yeah. It's like the first thing my brain goes to.
Oh.
Anyways.
Yeah, so apparently, unfortunately, this was a dead body that this guy found. And
That's not great.
I
Sorry.
liked your tangent. Um, and they found that, excuse me, they found that his car had run out of gas. So their thought was that ran out of gas, got out of his car to walk to get some gas, got hit by a car. Well, as they further examined his body, he had severe head trauma, like to the point where their first thought was that he got shot. And so much so that they searched the area for bullet casings and came back the next day to search again. Um, Another thing was that had he got hit by a car, he would not have been positioned the way he was positioned. And they say that it's weird that he would have been in the middle of the road had he been hit by a car.
Yeah.
He also had on very loose fitting shoes, and those were still on his feet. Again, had he been hit by a car, they probably would have flown off. The blood patterns also did not match with him getting hit by a car. And police wrote in the report that foul play was involved. And then that was it. Nothing more came of this case.
What?
Yeah. So when the media reached out for the police report and they were able to read it, he said that Buster Murdaugh's name was written in the report, and the Murdaughs were mentioned like more than 40 times in this report. Not once did the Murdaughs get interviewed.
Of course not.
Yeah. And at first, apparently, the town really rallied to figure out what happened to Stephen. But when no more evidence came about, the case just kind of went cold and disappeared. So Stephen's mother was pissed, and she actually hired a private investigator, and he started asking questions and talking, and rumors were swirling that there were two or three guys in a car who met up with Stephen. So the rumor was that Stephen and Buster Murdaugh were actually together and they were going to come out to the Murdaugh family, but that was not okay. So not only were the Murdaughs like a very rich, prominent family, they were in small southern town. So this was not okay. And the rumor is that he ran out of gas, even ran out of gas, and he called Buster to come help him. And Buster was with a couple other friends, and I think like to save face, they like picked on him or whatever. And then the thought is that they killed him. Um, and then the Murdaughs obviously made sure that everyone stayed quiet.
Oh my gosh.
And here's some kind of damning evidence for that. So the day Stephen died, the coroner called Stephen's parents, obviously, to like tell him what happened. And the second phone call his parents got were from the Murdaughs. And they said that they would take his case pro bono. So again, like they tried to do with the Mallory Beach case, they could control the narrative. Um, but again, this never comes to fruition because nothing ever happens. The case just kind of disappears. But that Thanksgiving of that year, a local paper ran a story that were interviewing Stephen's mom, and the paper did throw in there that they believe a prominent, well-known family was rumored to be involved. Like they couldn't say the name because otherwise they would open themselves up to lawsuits, but they put that in there.
Wow.
And people went to that reporter and was like, dude, you're really freaking brave.
Like
So
you
like
are
people,
screwing yourself over there.
yeah, so like people of the area knew, what happens, but again, nothing really came of it. However, the private investigator, when he was researching Stephen's case, came across that groundskeeper who then told him about Gloria's death and was the one that said, Alec wasn't even there. And he said he was the one that said, her feet were above her head and we had to lay her vertical and there was like blood everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
But like, could she not? I mean, I'm sure this is probably not a thing. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like she could have obviously tripped backwards. And then yes, that does account for the feet being above her head.
Correct.
But could she not have like rolled and then the feet would like could end up above her head? I know I'm like reaching, but again, just kind of trying to play devil's advocate here.
Like if she fell forward.
No, like if she still fell. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because she could have fallen forward and then like kind of tumbled. I don't know. I don't know how steep those stairs are. I've been to houses and the stairs are really steep, and then some houses they're not as steep. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, these were like front porch stairs though, so I wouldn't think they'd be super steep.
I'm just thinking of like a big mansion where they're like really high up. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think because if you fall forward, you're not gonna like your head would have to tuck under and you'd have to
Well,
like
no, because you could have been like poof, and
twist,
then like I don't know.
like kind of falling backwards that way. Yeah, that'd be pretty hard, I think.
Well, she tripped over a dog. It's not like she just fell, like she tripped.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But you're
I
saying
mean,
like she fell,
obviously,
are you saying like she fell forward and hit her head and then like stumbled backwards?
yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. Like obviously the family did it, but like I've been it was just bugging me
Yeah,
that whole
yeah,
time because I was trying to think about that. I'm like, well, it
yeah,
could have maybe happened.
yeah,
But I do obviously like think it's super suspicious,
yeah,
but
yeah. Well, and
again,
there's
my
gonna be
brain's just trying
more.
to like pick apart different pieces
Yeah, absolutely. No,
because
and
it's
there'll be
so weird.
yeah. And there'll be something else that makes it seem a little bit more likely that it was the Murdaughs. So,
Okay. Okay.
so this death of Paul and Maggie made investigators reopen the investigation of Stephen Smith because of the evidence that they found during this investigation. However, because this case is still new-ish, they haven't released what that evidence was, nor have they released like what's happening with that investigation really. Um, so as far as we know, the investigation is still ongoing, but they haven't really updated since then. So Stephen Smith is his death is still being investigated. So that's where that case ends. So the investigation found out that Alec was also stealing money from his clients at his law firm. So misappropriation of funds or embezzlement, if you will. And they found this out and forced him to resign. And this was resigning from his family's company. His great granddad started this company, and now he has to resign from it for stealing money.
Wow. What a
So,
loser.
yeah. So all this pressure is putting a lot on him. Also, reopening the case of the investigation into Stephen Smith. And then 3 months after the murder of Paul and Maggie, Alec was found shot in the head on the side of the road while he was changing his tire. He was
What?
airlifted to the hospital. Mhm. First, they said he was airlifted to Savannah, and then his lawyers were like, no, no, it was Charleston. And the media was kind of like confused, like, what's going on? And then the 911 call was released. Alec had called 911 himself. He was super calm. And the 911 call, I listened to it, like super collected. He's just like, yeah, I've been shot. I was changing my tire. Someone stopped to help me, and then they shot me. She's like, well, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. I just can't drive. And she's like, well, where did you get shot? And he's like, I think in the head somewhere.
And this
Um,
was like all before the events of this case transpired with the
no,
like with Maggie.
this was 3 months after the murder of Paul and Maggie.
Oh my God.
So come to find out, Alec arranged this. He said that he wanted to die, so he hired someone to shoot him. And if he did it this way, it would look like someone murdered him, and then his son Buster could still get the insurance payout.
Oh my God.
So,
Like,
yeah.
no.
So he had his drug dealer
No
do it. And
way.
yeah, so all of this comes out on the news, and Alec, of course, is like, oh, I need to go to rehab. So he immediately went to rehab. And
That's your takeaway.
right, exactly. Um, and the shooter was Curtis Edward Smith. He was a former client and was facing charges because of this incident, for insurance fraud and assisted suicide. Now, you could go down a whole rabbit hole about this Curtis Edward Smith. So apparently, he was receiving consistent payments from Alec before all this happened. And Alec has insisted that this was all for drugs. And Alec's drug of choice was Oxycontin. So one reporter did the math and found out with all the payments that Alec paid him, it would have given a person who had a very heavy addiction to drugs 114 years worth of drugs.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So obviously all that money was not just for drugs. So then they're saying, okay, well, what was some of that money for? Which is something they haven't really figured out. So you can go down a whole rabbit hole there.
Did you
But
go down that rabbit hole?
I started to, and I was like, no, focus. So okay. So Curtis says that Alex had it actually wasn't a conspiracy, that he didn't know what was going on, that Alec had just been like, hey, I have a flat tire, can you come help me? So he went to go help Alec, and then Alec had staged this kind of like struggle with a gun, and he got shot that way, or he shot himself at one point, but that Curtis said that Alec had set Curtis up for this and he was not a part of it. So take that with what you will.
Huh? That's so silly.
Yeah. So during this time, while Alec was in rehab, and because this came out about these funds that he was paying Curtis, SLED, which stands for I was gonna look it up, but I
Somebody
didn't.
literally else died.
Yes. Sorry. It stands for the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division.
That should be SCLED. That's
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah.
It's not a great acronym.
It's not great, no. But so during this time, because of this news that was coming out, SLED opened up an investigation to the misappropriation funds from the law firm that Alex stole. He was forced to resign, but apparently they had never pressed charges against him. So at this point, SLED opened up this investigation and was like, hey, wait a minute, that's illegal. They executed a warrant on his property for a bunch of files. And some reporter took his drone out to their property to try and get pictures of SLED walking out with files, for like a newspaper article or whatever. But he got there kind of late. And instead of getting pictures of the SLED pulling out files, he got pictures of Buster and another person removing shotguns from the house.
That's suspicious.
Yes. Buster put a bunch of shotguns in his truck. They went over to the hunting kennels, got a couple other things, grabbed like a hunting dog, and left.
Was Buster involved?
No charges have been brought to him. I
Just Alec?
I we'll get to it, but I think that I think there's some pretty shaky evidence in this case, but
Okay.
so they thought like, well, maybe some of these guns, because they still don't have the murder weapon, so like, well, maybe Buster's trying to get rid of some of these guns. I'm not sure. I'm sure that if Alec did do this, which I think he did, I'm sure Buster knows. I mean, this is a whole family affair, right? You know what I mean? I feel like, I don't know, but
Like it just it just seems weird that he would like kill his wife and one of his children, but not another one.
yeah, and I don't know if that's maybe just like he happened to be there, but
Like opportunity.
yeah, but I feel like that's a pretty, I mean, that's your kid. I feel like there has to be more to it than that to kill your kid. But I don't know. But anyway, so with all of this happening, people started to think that maybe Alec knew a bit more about the murders of his wife and son than he was saying. And he's already been caught lying a couple times. He's got this investigation going on for stealing money. So, people started to raise eyebrows at this. And one was that of the county coroner. And she decided to look back through the coroner records that were on file and found some weird things about that 2018 death of Gloria Statterfield. She saw that the death was ruled natural, which is weird for a fall case. And because it was ruled natural, the death was never reported to the coroner and there wasn't an autopsy done.
That's super weird.
Yeah,
Like at least an accidental fall. Like that's not
right.
natural.
Yeah. So she sent all of this to SLED and said, hey, can you open up an investigation on this? And so this was all over the papers, right? That like, this is weird about Gloria's death. They're going to open up an investigation on this. And in it, they put how Alex basically sued himself for the insurance or whatever and got $4.3 million from it and gave it to Gloria's kids.
I
And
never
Gloria,
understood why the rich steal,
to get rich, I
right?
guess.
But like you're
Get rich.
already stupidly rich.
And he's like generationally wealthy.
Exactly.
Um, But Gloria's kids read this and they were like, 4.3 million dollars. We never got 4.3 million dollars. We never got any money from him.
Seriously.
Yeah.
What a loser.
So being that this was an insurance settlement and it didn't go to the correct people, this is also misappropriation of funds. And this was something that they had proof of. So their lawyers went to the FBI because at first their lawyers like, well, maybe there was just a mistake. Maybe it's like sitting in a trust or something. So they reached out to the Murdaughs. They never heard back. And they're like, okay, well, this is $4.3 million. It's like misappropriated, missing. So they went to the FBI with it. And so the FBI opened an investigation, and come to find out, Alec had taken a commercial insurance policy out on his property 1 month before Gloria died. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, she was pushed.
Yes. So Alec was arrested for this. Finally. Finally, he got arrested for something. And it was for this misappropriation of funds in this insurance case that should have gone to Gloria's kids. And this happened in October of 2021. He went to court, but he's like, whatever, I'll get bonded out and I'll go home until trial. Nope, the judge denied his bond.
Good. Wow, something was
Yes.
done right.
Right. So while Alec was sitting in jail, his son Buster and a friend were pictured gambling in Vegas, and this was reported everywhere in the media. And they were saying that Buster was spending those funds that Alec had misappropriated, either just like out of stupidity or to like hide where this money was going on other misappropriated funds that he had.
Could it not have just been their money?
Yeah, that could have been that too.
Like, did they have proof that it was specifically that 4.3 million?
They don't. At least they didn't say. So,
Okay. I'm not defending that.
oh, absolutely not.
I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
asking questions,
yeah,
like
absolutely.
I'm curious.
Um, yeah, and so during this time, that was just like an offshoot thing. That doesn't really have any point to anything. I just thought I'd throw it in there. But during
Okay.
during this time, some evidence had come to light in the murder case of Maggie and Paul. So the coroner said that they were killed around 9 p.m. And according to Alec, he wasn't home until 10:07 when he found their body. Well, there is some high velocity impact fluid, which is basically gunshot residue, that they took from Alec that night, and he tested positive for gunshot residue on his clothes and his hands. Now, my first thought is, well, he's at a hunting lodge. Could it be from hunting? I'm not 100% sure how long gunshot residue stays on you. But the weird thing is, they found it on the inside of his jacket, and the gunshot residue expert or the ballistics expert or whatever said that generally wouldn't happen, the amount that was on the inside of his jacket. So usually it would just hit the outside. So it seems to reason that he may have had it inside out in order to hide that evidence.
Can you pause?
They also had a witness that said that he saw Alec walk into his mother's house and like up the stairs with he said blue tarp. Okay. And when they looked in this area, they did find a blue tarp that was just like normal, but they also found a blue jacket. And this was the jacket that had the gunshot residue on the inside. And so their thought is that he had the gun wrapped up in this stuff and brought it there, but it's gone now. They've never found that. They don't have the murder weapon. But that is one of the evidence that the court brought up. They also found a video on Paul's phone where you can clearly hear, and they called up witnesses to confirm that this is Alec's voice. You can clearly hear Alec talking to Maggie in the background of this video, and it was timestamped at 8:44 p.m. which is
Oh.
15 minutes before the murders happened.
Do they know what he's saying?
I don't think it's relevant. They didn't ever say what it was.
Oh,
I think it's just that he's there when he said he wasn't. So they're
yeah.
saying either, he saw what happened or he did it, which I think we all know which we think it is. Um, so they said, so on July 20th, 2022, Alec was disbarred and he was charged with the murder of Maggie and Paul based on this evidence. He pleads not guilty. Again, his bond is denied, but he's already in jail anyway for the other trial or for the other thing. Alec's trial lasted for 6 weeks. The New Yorker said this was their headline for it, and I just have it in here word for word because I think it's hilarious. In the course of the trial, someone called in a bomb threat. A defense lawyer pointed a rifle at the prosecution while proffering theories about how the shootings had occurred. 2 jurors were knocked out by COVID-19 and 2 more owing to other medical problems. A fifth was removed on the last day for discussing the case outside of court. As she was sent on her way, she told the judge she'd left a dozen eggs in the jury room, providing a rare moment of comic relief. So it was just chaos. This trial was chaos.
Absolutely unhinged.
So I looked it up, and this bomb threat didn't have anything to do with the case. It just coincidence. It
Threw it
cleared.
in there.
Yeah, it cleared it postponed the trial for 2.5 hours while they searched for this bomb that didn't exist. So,
Jeez.
so they said, so what motive did defense or did prosecution put forth? They said that the motive was because Alec was going to be exposed for all of his stealing, and being forced to resign from the job that his great grandfather created. And so because of this, he wanted to murder his wife and his son to become the victim and to get sympathy to kind of draw attention away from these crimes that were going to be exposed. Which I don't know. I don't think that's a great motive.
No, but I mean, nothing about this guy is kind of nothing that comes out of his mouth seems kind of intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess if you're raised with money and you're raised in this kind of family where they get away with everything, then maybe this did seem like a good I'll just kill him and it'll, take pressure off the other thing, and I'll get away with it. Maybe. I don't know. I don't
Well,
think it
and
seems like a
that's
great motive.
no, and I mean, he's obviously super entitled,
Yeah.
and people that are entitled just,
Think differently.
yeah.
Yeah. So prosecution called more than 60 witnesses to quote poke holes in Alec's alibi and point out inconsistencies in his story. But they really only had those two pieces of evidence, the gunshot residue and the video. Alec did take to the stand to defend himself, which doesn't really go well, but he usually go over well. But he went up there to talk about kind of why he lied so much during this investigation. And he said it was due to paranoia because of his addiction. So he said his addiction made him really paranoid. So when the cops asked him if he was there, he lied and said no because he was afraid they were going to pin it on him. But he was actually there. He had no explanation though of what happened. He didn't know. So as the trial ended, jury deliberation was they deliberated for less than 3 hours. And they found him guilty, as we've seen in the news. And he was sentenced.
Wow.
Yeah, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences, one for each person he tried.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow, that
So,
never happens.
yeah. So, I mean, he's obviously going to appeal. But all of this just happened. So, he'll appeal it, and I just don't know. I think he might have a chance in an appeal because I don't think they had a lot of great evidence for this. It's a lot of
Well,
circumstantial.
well, and he's rich too.
True, true, true. Um, so as far as we know with the Stephen Smith case, it's still being investigated. Gloria's case, they are going to exhume her body. They got the okay for it, and that was the last piece of evidence or last piece of update for that. So they will exhume her body and go from there. So both cases have been reopened and are being investigated.
Whoa.
And that is the Alec Murdaugh case.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's a shit show.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And it's crazy that I had never heard of this, being that I lived in the low country for like 4 years.
Yeah.
And I had never heard of the Murdaughs. I had never heard of these cases, nothing.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Like, it is just wild that shit like that actually happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Still
it's
today.
like, well, yeah, and it just sounds like something that would be a movie, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I
That's
just, like I said,
crazy.
I'm afraid on his appeal what's going to happen because I don't think they had great evidence in this. But we'll see. Can you let us know about this great women's oppression you have?
No, I don't want to. So, this is actually the light version this week.
Oh.
This is the medieval version. And then next week is going to be the more like modern version. It happened in the like early 1900s.
Is that the one I sent you?
Yeah.
I saw a TikTok and I sent this to Jessica and I said, this is a you story. You have to cover it. And it's awful.
It really was awful. It was called The American Plan, and it really wasn't very American like. So, like, not an America I'd want to live in. So, this is the
Oh,
olden day one.
okay.
Happened in the medieval times, mostly in like the UK and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but it also came over to the Americas as well, especially during the witch trials.
Cool.
So, are we ready?
I guess.
Anger. And pardon me because I am very sick right now.
Poor thing.
Women suspected of being scolds, so SCOLDS, scolds, shrews, or having loose morals were sometimes put in masks known as scolds bridles
Ugh.
that had an iron gag that prevented them from speaking.
Ugh.
Bridles are frequently thought to be used on horses, but the so called Scold's bridle was also applied to people from at least the 16th century and well into the 19th. This gag equipped iron mask was typically fastened to women who were accused of blasphemy, arguing, or engaging in gossip. I would be in one every day.
Me too.
Wearers were frequently paraded through the streets so that bystanders.
Bystanders.
Sorry, I
Those
can't
standard
breathe.
people.
I can't breathe. Might boo and hurl objects at them.
Oh my gosh. That's awful.
Yeah. It just reminds me of that scene from Game of Thrones with
Yeah.
Cersei when she was
Yeah.
paraded around. Yeah.
Shame.
Yeah.
Shame.
Literally, though, this is basically what they did.
Yeah.
As awful as that sounds, the Scold's bridle wasn't always the worst or only punishment for women who were accused of speaking out of turn. And it was decided by town officials that the offending party would wear these. Town officials. So, like judges and magistrates,
Oh my God.
men. Although, what? getting riled up.
No, I am. I'm shaking my head. I'm just like, oh my
The
God, this
way
is
you looked at me,
awful.
you're like, whoa.
No, I'm in agreement. This is my
Okay.
shocked face. Like not shocked because I've heard of these, but like just the oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like as if this was a thing. Yeah. Um, Although the designs differed, they were frequently similar to each other. According to the BBC, they were iron masks that resembled a muzzle or cage for the head. Most had a metal gag to keep the tongue down, and a lock at the back kept the bridle in place.
Ugh.
It gets worse. Some of these gags were spiked, according to the National Trust for Scotland, so that if the wearer attempted to speak, their tongue would be sliced.
Oh, how bad? I mean, think about like when you accidentally bite your tongue, like how bad that hurts.
Or,
Oh,
trying to swallow.
oh,
Yeah. The first mention of a Scold's bridle, according to the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic, appears to have been made in the 14th century by one of Geoffrey Chaucer's characters who remarks, "Would she were bolted with a bridle." That is the actual sentence. I am not saying it incorrectly.
yeah, Old English.
Yeah. Yet, stories about Scold's bridles don't start to surface until the 16th century. The Wessex Museum claims that an iron brank, also known as a Scold's bridle, was originally used in Scotland in 1567. The final would not appear until 1856.
Oh my gosh.
One statute in Edinburgh, is it Edinburgh? It's
Edinburgh, Edinburgh, Edinburgh.
Edinburgh because it's not Edinburgh. I think it's just Edinburgh.
That sounds right to me.
Okay. So it said that anyone who committed blasphemy or was thought to be immortal would be subject to being struck with iron branks. According to the Museum of Witchcraft and Sorcery, a farmer in Lichfield used iron branks on a woman in order to quiet her clamorous tongue in 1789. The farmer made the woman wear the bridle and made her walk through a field while the neighborhood kids hooted at her.
Oh my God.
It seems that nobody felt sorry for her because she was extremely despised by her neighbors.
It's awful.
Yet, it's awful. Yet, the Scold's bridle wasn't just applied to Scolds. It was applied to a Quaker called Dorothy Waugh in 1655. According to Lancaster Castle, she was sentenced to hours in the iron branks for preaching in the marketplace. Yet it appears that the locals were sympathetic, which is good.
Yeah.
Throughout the following 200 years, Scold's bridles were mentioned in passing. However, this method of punishment started to lose favor at the start of the Victorian era. The
I would
music,
hope so.
yeah, right? We're getting to modern. The Museum of Witchcraft and Magic claims that in 1821, a judge commanded the destruction of an iron brank by declaring, "Take away that remnant of barbarism,"
Yeah.
which is good. I'm
Yeah.
glad. Because I would be in one every single day.
Right? Same.
Like other Victorians, he began to view them as ridiculous and out of date. Nonetheless, it wasn't until
Good.
1856, 30 years later, that a Scold's bridle was finally used in writing. Iron branks were a particularly torturous and harsh type of punishment, but they were by no means the only strategy employed to correct women who were thought to be scolds. Consider cucking and ducking stools, and the two expressions, which are frequently used interchangeably, relate to different punishments.
I don't like the sound of the cucking.
The ducking is actually the worst one.
Okay. Well, I think it doesn't sound as bad because it's got duck in it.
Quack, quack.
Yeah.
Women who were accused of being scolds during the Middle Ages might be chained to a cucking stool, which was a chair, toilet, or commode. They might be left there or led around the town in a parade. So they just sat on a chair and were paraded around town.
That's weird.
I know.
Okay.
Around the time of the Tudor era, ducking stools became a heavier penalty for scolds. These required tying a scold to a chair, just as cucking stools. But ducking stools dunked ladies into the water instead of leaving them there, and women frequently died as a result of shock or drowning.
Oh my God.
It's kind of along the lines of if they float, they're not a witch.
Right. Yeah.
When a brick is tied to their ankle.
And like, so if they die, they're not a witch.
Yeah, exactly. Oops, our bad.
Yeah.
These devices were used to punish scolds in order to regulate moral behavior, degrade the offender, and intimidate other women into silence. After all, when the implicit threat was, you could be next, it was difficult to object to a policy like the scold's bridle or the
Yeah.
cucking and ducking stools.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what funny words.
Yeah. Yeah. But I can imagine where you wouldn't want to stand up to those because then you would just be the next one on there. So I can definitely see where that's kind of a catch 22 there.
Yeah, like why would you want to speak out of term when you have this kind of stuff being paraded around in front of you on a daily basis?
Exactly. Exactly.
Like that would be horrible, especially when you find out that it could cut your tongue or
Yeah.
you could die.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Absolutely.
thankfully, items like scold's bridles, cucking stools, and ducking stools are no longer used.
Thankfully.
But regrettably, the practice of policing or censoring women's voice has not changed. In the end, there seems to be a connection between cucking stools, ducking stools, and the methods used to test women to see if they were witches. Women who dared speak out publicly at a time when it was expected that they be subservient were the only ones that were attacked. Good things have changed though, right?
Yeah.
So now that we've kind of like learned about all that stuff, I'm gonna move on to some more fucked up stuff. So some really bad medieval execution methods.
Perfect.
So the first one we have all been heard of is hanged, drawn, and quartered. Typically being drawn simply meant being pulled by a horse. The phrase was sometimes used to refer to later drawing the victim's intestines out of their body, which had a far grislier connotation. The step of being hanged is obviously self explanatory, but in many instances, the death was not the result of the hanging itself. Instead, to ensure that the victim would still be alive for the actual agony, which was the quartering, the executioners would hang the prisoner until he was almost dead and then release him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Castrating the prisoner and setting their genitalia and occasionally their intestines on fire was the first step in this process.
Oh my God.
The inmate was then severed from his head. The body would then be divided into at least 4 pieces and dropped into a simmering mixture of spices. This stopped birds from devouring the corpses, and it also made it possible to display the body parts in public places across the nation as a macabre warning.
Man, they were brutal back then.
It gets worse.
Yay.
Death by elephant.
Whoa. What?
Yeah, this is horrible. Although, while they are still respected in the Buddhist and Hindu religions, less is known about elephants' precise role as medieval executioners. Death by elephant almost sounds too terrible to be genuine, despite the fact that the death penalty was an unjustifiably brutal practice in the Middle Ages. Um, Standardized in the Middle Ages, this medieval technique of execution only seldom made it to the West before falling out of favor in the 19th century. Death by elephant was typically reserved for enemy soldiers or citizens who engaged in crimes like tax fraud and robbery. These executions, as one might think, relied on an elephant's raw strength to crush a victim, generally by pressing on their head or abdomen with a foot.
Oh my gosh.
Executioners occasionally, though, used more inventive methods. For example, one Delhi sultanate turned the deaths of prisoners into a public spectacle where elephants were trained to cut people open with pointed blades fitted to their tusks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And you got to think about this for a second is the fact that that is not a general disposition for an elephant. So they were trained to do that shit.
Right.
Like somebody took time out of their day to train a fucking elephant to murder a human being.
Can you even imagine that that's your job? Like,
No.
ridiculous.
And the last one is gibbeting.
Oh,
Do you know what gibbeting is?
I do not.
I'm sure you do. Um, the act of gibbeting involved placing convicts in human shaped cages and hanging them up to be seen by the public as a warning to others. The wooden framework from which the cage was hung is referred to as the gibbet. People have occasionally previously been executed before being gibbeted. They were also sometimes still alive and were just allowed to perish from exposure and famine.
Lovely.
Those, yeah, and they'd also be packed up by crows
Ooh.
and eaten. Those who had been gibbeted were terrifying to see since they were immobile, horrible, and reeked while they were alive and while they died.
Oh my gosh. That's awful.
Yeah. The popularity of gibbeting in England peaked in the 1740s, and the 1752 Murder Act even made it mandatory for anyone who had been found guilty of murder.
Oh my gosh.
This law stipulated that their bodies had to either be publicly dissected or gibbeted. A public gibbeting frequently attracted large audiences. Shocker.
Yeah. People were like crazy back then, man.
Yeah. Naturally, those who resided near a gibbet were not enthusiastic because it stank.
I bet. Oh my gosh.
Women were not gibbeted because they were hot property for surgeons and anatomists. So they were excused from being gibbeted, but they were dissected for research. By 1832, gibbeting was no longer in vogue, yet 134 individuals were hanged in chains between 1752 and 1832, and it wasn't finally outlawed until 1834.
Oh my gosh. That's so like late.
Recent? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my weird story this week.
I hated it and loved it all at once.
Perfect.
That's exactly what you want.
I know it was like a shorty, but I feel like hot trash right now.
I'm so sorry. Jessica's very sick.
Me and my one coworker laugh because her and I basically we don't even work in the same office, but we keep like rotating illnesses. So like she'll be really sick one week and then I'll be really sick the next week and then like just goes back and forth. Because I had that really bad stomach flu 2 weeks ago that
Yeah.
prevented us from recording. And then she got it the next day, but we weren't even like, we don't work in the same office. We don't see each other.
That's so weird.
We just talk to each other on the phone every day.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Better
so
those germs
weird.
to the phone line.
Literally. But anyways, yeah, that I'm all done.
All right. Do you have any funny jokes?
No, I think just like my like countenance right now is pretty funny. So
All right. Well, if you want to find more of us lovely ladies, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube.
and if you would like to rate and review us, you can do so on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon Music.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And we look forward to bringing you 2 new stories next week.
Bye.